Thanks very much. We're going to open up very quickly now for questions from the audience, but we have a surprise sort of announcement, an unusual announcement, because we have an unusual addition to the speakers this morning. We have here in the front row probably the most famous whistleblower in modern American history, Daniel Ellsberg, author of the Pentagon Papers, and we'll hear from him shortly. I would request, though, during the questions, that all the questioners to understand that the speakers are pleased to answer any and all questions concerning the release of the documents, the analysis of the data, and conclusions and the work that's been done. But I think I'd like, if I may, just to open the questions by asking Daniel Ellsberg, what's your reaction to this kind of release of material? It's quite different than the one that you did yourself.
Well, it's different and it's the same in many ways, just as the war that we're facing right now, the one in Afghanistan, which I call Vietnamistan, has really more fundamental similarities than it has differences. I've been asked here to make a couple of comments rather than questions to you right away. I'll just say that a couple of us here came over the ocean last night for the opportunity to stand with Julian Assange and the rest of you here in a circumstance that really I've been waiting to see for 40 years. And that's a number is not drawn out of the air, that's a precise figure. Judy Ehrlich next to me just co-directed a film called The Most Dangerous Man in America. Well, she's working now on a film, or hopes to do a film on Julian Assange and his sources. And I haven't talked to her what the title would be, but it seems inevitable, The Most Dangerous Man in the World. Now, how do you get to be the most dangerous man in the world? Well, first, empirically, if one country, our country in this case, is pursuing for prosecution that person, regards him as dangerous over 3 continents at this point, in Australia and Britain and America. The threat that is made by the Pentagon, as we read over the last few days, of warning newsmen to stand away from this material, to refuse to receive it, and if they do receive it, to return it, seems absurd on its face. We're not dealing with the 7,000 pieces of paper, top secret pieces of paper that comprise the Pentagon paper. The Pentagon did make a demand to the New York Times that they return that pile of paper to the Pentagon. The Times refused, and until, in fact, never did return it, and refused to stop the presses until a court order came down. But with cyber material, it's all over the world right now, and in several papers right now, the demand seems absurd. I understand the reason for those words, because they echo the words first used against me, the legal words of 18 U.S.C. 793 paragraphs D and E, which for the first time used the so-called Espionage Act as if it were the kind of official secrets act that you have in Britain, which simply criminalizes the release of any classified material to any unauthorized person. We don't have such a law. And the irony now is that President Obama, in making these clear threats of applying this law to anybody who deals with this information, including not only the journalists, but the words apply to the people who read it and don't return it to the proper authorities, actually. President Obama's threats are not entirely without credibility here, because he has started as many prosecutions for leaks as all previous presidents put together. It's a small number. It's 3. The last one is Bradley Manning. It's small because we don't have an Official Secrets Act. And prior to Bush and Obama, presidents took it for granted that any application of the Espionage Act was likely to be overthrown as unconstitutional in our First Amendment by the Supreme Court. But now, facing a different Supreme Court, and after 9/11, Obama is making a new experiment on this issue, which will really change the relation of the press to sources very radically. As it is, any source, with or without this change in the law, who gave this kind of material, 400,000 pages, documents, 800,000 pages, to WikiLeaks, would have to know that they were facing a risk of being where Bradley Manning is right now, in prison, accused of these things. And we don't know, I don't know who the source is. If the President should prove beyond reasonable doubt that it is Bradley Manning, we can give him his unreserved admiration from us and thanks for what he did. But whoever did it, in fact, acted very appropriately in the course of a hopeless, deadly, stalemated war, and which has one characteristic, by the way, in Iraq, which isn't going to come out clearly in these 400,000 pages or in the discussion, and that is that the origins of the war were clearly in the form of lying to the publics of Britain and America, and of carrying on, in the order to carry on a clearly illegal crime against the peace, a war of aggression. So all these civilian casualties are killed in a war of aggression, but one has to say also the non-civilian casualties that are reported here are in the role of fighting against foreign occupiers, invaders, and by the standards of the world, the question is raised very much whether their death by the invader is not also to be counted among the murders until they continue. So I want very much to congratulate all of you who are mining this material to learn what we could have learned if it had come out earlier. Say? Oh, yeah, okay. No, you want to do Craig? Yeah. Yes, Craig Murray here is representing a group that was mentioned earlier. I didn't know you were here. Mentioned earlier, giving the Sam Adams Award for Intelligence Integrity, and we want very much to appreciate him in that guise.
Thank you. I'm here as a former recipient of the Sam Adams Award for Intelligence, for Integrity and Intelligence. My name's Craig Murray. I was British ambassador in Uzbekistan before I made a series of leaks about UK intelligence sources' use of torture. This award has been given to a number of people, including last to Colonel Larry Wilkinson in the UK, to Major Frank Grebel, to Catherine Gunn of GCHQ. It's given to people who, in the public interest, leak details of the dark things that governments do. And I'm very happy to present this year's award to Julian Assange.
I think we'll take questions now from the floor. Right down there. Go ahead.
Neil Chandler from the Daily Star Sunday. I'd just like to ask Phil Shiner. You mentioned a forthcoming case involving deaths and torturing of Iraqi civilians in British detention. How many deaths are you talking about? Further, you mentioned the young girl getting shot by a squaddy in a tank. Could you give us any more details on that? Where and when did that happen?
I'll do my best on both questions. On the 20th of May 2003, Lieutenant Colonel Nicholas Mercer, a UK Army officer who was head of Army Legal, wrote an order that says chillingly to all the troops who were there, there have recently been a number of deaths of Iraqi civilians in custody with various units. Now, the MOD have lied ever since. When Panorama tried to find out what did Mercer mean by a number, they said 2. It's not 2. It's probably 7 or 8, and it may be more. But that was the 20th of May, 2003. The ongoing disclosure in the Bahamut inquiry keeps turning up more and more and more cases where the Royal Military Police have investigated deaths where there's a common pattern. Often these men are arrested and subjected to severe abuse on arrest in their homes. Sometimes women and children are abused, and sometimes pregnant women have given miscarriages, etc. Then these men are abused, rifle-butted, hooded, sometimes with 2 hoods, in the extreme conditions, and unsurprisingly, they die. And every time they die, it's said that they've died of a heart attack or natural causes. They've never been seen by a UK doctor. usually somebody has accepted somebody else's word or something that's been written down on a piece of paper. So I can't tell you how many Iraqis we killed whilst we held them in UK detention facilities. You'll have to ask the Ministry of Defence that question. As for the small girl, it was habit for her and her young friends to play in the street, and often UK tanks would stop and would get out, and trying to win the battle for hearts and minds, they would give the children sweets. On the particular morning in question, for some unknown reason that's never been explained, so I can't tell you, the tank stops at the end of the street. She's there in her yellow dress. A rifleman pops up and blows them away. And you'll have to ask the Ministry of Defence why that happened, because they won't tell me. And that's one of the reasons and one of the cases why we are calling for judicial inquiry into all of these deaths.
Back there. Yeah, go ahead.
I am Deborah Haynes for The Times. This is a question for Julian. The Pentagon spokesman said last night that the names of 300 Iraqis have been released as part of the Iraq war logs, and their lives could now be in danger. Are you worried that the careful vetting that you outlined this morning maybe wasn't careful enough and people's lives have been put at risk?
No, I'm worried that the press chooses to credibly report statements like that from the Pentagon. In fact, the Pentagon would not have been able to review our material in those few hours. It is simply logistically impossible. And we also have strong confidence in our redaction process, which is an opt-in process. So that statement by the Pentagon, presumably at its base, is referring to their own internal review of their collection of significant actions for Iraq. It is not referring to our material, but you'll notice that they do not say that fact. Instead, they try and issue some deceptive statement to fool the world press, as they did last time with some similar statements, into reporting something that is not true.